Baik, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, karena waktu sudah menunjukkan pukul 9.30 tepat, izinkan saya, Virus Trista Isma, selaku moderator pada pagi ini untuk membuka acara webinar. Mentari terbenam, terbitlah malam, pergi ke pasar, lupa minta kembalian. Izinkan saya ucapkan salam untuk para hadirin sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Semoga Bapak dan Ibu selalu dalam keadaan sehat dan selalu dalam lindungan Tuhan Yang Maha Esa. Pertama-tama, kami ucapkan terima kasih atas partisipasi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian yang sudah meluangkan waktu untuk menghadiri webinar pagi ini, Beyond the Hype, Unveiling the Limits of Ecotourism for Quality Tourism Development. Selamat pagi dan selamat datang. Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, merupakan suatu kehormatan bagi kita semua bahwa seluruh pembicara telah hadir pada hari ini. Selamat datang, saya haturkan kepada tim Kementerian Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia. Selamat datang kepada Ibu Pauline Suharno, selaku Sekjen Gabungan Industri Pariwisata Indonesia, yang pada hari ini mewakili Bapak Haryadi Sukamdhani, selaku Ketua Umum GIPI. Good morning and welcome Mr. Peter Semone, Chairman of the Board of the Pacific Asia Travel Association. Sudah bergabung juga dengan kita semua selaku Sustainability Expert, Bapak Hendry Julius Wijaya, dan kepada pembicara terakhir kita pada sesi nanti, selamat datang Bapak Diki Surya Atmaja, Principal Cartographer in History and Heritage, CRS ITB, Railway Heritage Trail Founder and Interpreter. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, sebelum kita memasuki acara inti, izinkan saya untuk membacakan susunan acara kita pada webinar pagi ini. Pertama-tama, acara akan dimulai dengan opening speech yang akan disampaikan oleh Ibu Pauline Suharno, dilanjutkan dengan keynote speech oleh Menteri Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia, Bapak Sandiaga Salahuddin Uno, lalu memasuki acara inti yang akan dibagi menjadi 3 sesi guna membahas berbagai topik. Topik pertama adalah Best Practices in Quality Tourism oleh Mr. Peter Semone. Dilanjutkan dengan topik kedua, The Limit of Ecotourism oleh Bapak Hendry Julius Wijaya. Dan topik terakhir yaitu Railway Heritage Trail oleh Bapak Diki Surya Atmaja. Seperti yang sudah disampaikan sebelumnya, kita akan memasuki topik pertama pada webinar ini dengan judul Best Practices in Quality Tourism yang nanti akan dibawakan oleh Mr. Peter Semone. Mr. Peter Semone merupakan tokoh berpengaruh dalam pengembangan pariwisata di Asia. Saat ini beliau menjabat sebagai Chairman of the Board of the Pacific Asia Travel Association. Beliau juga telah berhasil melaksanakan berbagai proyek dan konsultasi yang didanai oleh mitra pembangunan internasional, termasuk proyek yang didanai donor di Timor Leste dan juga Vietnam. Selain itu, beliau juga mendirikan sekolah kejuruan Lao National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality yang diakui secara internasional di Laos. Mr. Peter adalah konsultan ahli terpercaya untuk UN Tourism dan Asian Development Bank, dan beliau juga pernah menjabat sebagai penasehat ahli pariwisata untuk pemerintah Indonesia. Kepada Mr. Peter Semone, kami persilahkan.
Terima kasih, Fairuz. Selamat pagi, saya ada di Nice, France. Baru tiba tadi malam. Ada acara di sini. Today is International Mountain Tourism Day. Jadi ada event di Nice, France hari ini untuk rayakan International Mountain Tourism Day. Saya senang sekali dapat undangan dari Bahar Academy dan saya mau ucapkan terima kasih kepada Ibu Sari untuk bantuan untuk persiapan semua dan Pak Bahar, saya baru ketemu. Nice to meet you. Ibu Pauline, bagus sekali kata-kata awal Anda dan ya banyak yang saya bisa tambah dari situ. Dan saya juga kepo itu GP apa itu. Jadi saya pengen tahu bagaimana sih itu si GP. So if you can go to the next slide, please, I would appreciate it. Saya mau mulai dengan hormati dua guru garis miring mentor saya di Indonesia. Karena saya dulu tiba di Indonesia sekitar tahun 89. Dan saya jadi anak angkat Pak Sri Budoyo. Kalau Anda nggak kenal si Pak Sri Budoyo, dia kerjasama dengan Presiden Soekarno dulu untuk awal-awal pariwisata di Indonesia. So he was a real inspirational figure in my life. And also Yo Bave, of course, everybody knows Yo Bave. And he was also a great inspiration to me and also to Indonesia. And I wanted to say here that Indonesia has been a part of PATA since 1957, so for a very, very long time. And these two people were instrumental in building tourism in Indonesia and also in their partnership with PATA. And kayaknya kita perlu visionary seperti itu untuk atasi semua challenges yang kita hadapi sekarang. So next slide, please. Dan saya mohon maaf, bahasa Indonesia saya agak amburadul ya. Jadi saya akan pakai bahasa campur. Soalnya saya terlalu lama di Thailand, lama sekali tidak balik ke Bali. Minggu depan saya akan balik. Istri saya kebetulan orang Indonesia, orang Bali. Dan seperti kalau nggak salah Ibu Pauline bilang ya, nama saya juga bisa Gede, I Gede Aris Kusuma, jadi lengkap ada nama Bali. These are the things that I was asked to present on, and I'm going to do it a little bit freestyle. Some of it's going to be covering this, but these are the topics that Ibu Sari wanted me to, and Bahar wanted me to cover. So next slide, please. Thank you. I think whenever I discuss tourism, I always want to remind people that we need to think about the supply side and we need to think about the demand side. And it's amazing how many people that work in tourism only think about the supply side or only think about the demand side. But to have good interaction in tourism, you must have a match of both supply and demand. And what I've written there is one should never assume if you build it, they will come. So that's too supply side thinking. It's very important to say, what does the customer want and how can we build according to that? And this requires a clear strategic approach. And one of the formula at the bottom, I think, is always interesting. Potential tourism demand minus existing supply really gives you the idea of where the gaps are within the tourism economy. So it's very important to think about these things. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, there's going to be more people internationally focused on sustainability. So there's going to be more tourism demand towards sustainability, which will force destinations to really start to become more sustainable. So I think if we have sustainability awareness on the demand side, and we start to have examples of like what Ibu Pauline mentioned on the supply side about less is more, and starting to deliver that to the customer, we will reach an equilibrium where there will be a better understanding of sustainability going forward. Tolong, next slide, please, yeah. I think it's important to always remember that there's really 2 or 3 distinct areas in a customer journey. So the tourism generating region is really the demand side. It's where the tourist comes from. So maybe the tourist comes from Jakarta and wants to visit Bali. That would be the generating region would be Jakarta. Or maybe they come from France, where I am right now. So that's really the supply or the demand side. And then we always have the transit. So for example, when I leave France, I will fly on Turkish Airways from Nice to Istanbul and then back to Bangkok. And that's really the transit route. And then the tourist destination region is when you arrive at the destination, and it's all of the services from tour guides to hotels to restaurants to all of the activities there. So it's always important to understand that for tourism to work, there needs to be good cooperation and linkage from the tourist generation region all the way to the tourist destination region. And the offer, the tourism offer, what the companies are offering from the supply side must continually seek ways to meet not only the needs, but also the desires and expectations of the consumers. And I think we always need to ask ourselves, who are our customers? Are our customers Indonesian tourists? And yes, like Ibu Pauline described, Indonesian customers have certain areas where they can be quite difficult. Their expectations are different than the expectations of Europeans or of Thai people or of Chinese people. What are their needs? We need to understand what their needs are. What do they want? What do they expect? And what price are they willing to pay? So everybody wants to get a cheap hotel rate. Let's talk about, kalau kita kasih contoh orang Indonesia, kalau orang Jakarta ke Bali ya pasti mereka mau harga yang terbaik. Tapi nanti seperti Ibu Pauline bilang, the shampoo to take away isn't there, and there's bottled water, and ada kekurangan. Yeah, the Indonesians will complain. They actually have very high expectations. So I think it's important to understand supply and demand of tourism and the interaction of all the functions. Because if we can't work together across the tourism value chain, we will never become sustainable. One hotel trying to be sustainable is not going to help create a sustainability across the value chain. Next slide, please. This is what Menteri barusan dia bilang bahwa Wonderful Indonesia website ada banyak informasi tentang tourism management, tentang sustainability. This is the dream of the Ministry of Tourism as to what quality tourism is and what they would like it to be. I think it's accurate, but it's good that the ministry has at least put out a goal for what they want. So quality tourism, and this is straight from the website, is to spend one's time in a destination by truly maximizing the whole journey and also being a responsible traveler. And it gives examples like experiencing completely immersive kinds of tourism, learning new life-changing philosophies from the locals, contributing to the sustainability of local community, being an important part of the environmental preservation, finding many new hidden gems on the destination, and avoiding larger crowds for better enjoyment. In fact, I think these are really admirable goals by the government of Indonesia. I don't think that they represent the interest of all travelers. I think the Asian travelers, again, like Ibu Pauline made the example of Indonesian travelers, but I think the same would happen for most travelers from Southeast Asia. Some of them are at this level of travel experiences, but many are not. I think many of these things are things that the Europeans are starting to be aware of, but not all Europeans. Maybe the French are different than the Russians. So it's very important that this is an ambitious goal for us to have, but how do we actually realistically look at each market and determine what are their interests? And is this realistic for them? Saya ada contoh di Bali, saya ada villa sama istri saya di Ubud. Dan awalnya kami selalu dapat tamu dari Korea. Kami hanya ada AC di kamar, only in the kamar tidur, but not in the living room area, karena di sana bisa buka jendela, bisa dapat fresh air. Orang Korea selalu komplain sama kita, kenapa nggak ada AC in the public area? And kami jawab sama mereka, sebaiknya mungkin Anda tinggal di hotel, mungkin hotel lebih lengkap dengan fasilitas. So again, this is an example of where people want cheap price, but they have this expectation of having all of the amenities. The next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through, there's tourism trends. There's lots of things that are happening. Some of them are fake news. Some of them are true, and some of them are aspirational. For sure, automation and personalization and tech-empowered travel, that's real. I go to China almost once a month, and susah sekali saya untuk buat payment aja. Orang nggak mau cash lagi, semua harus pakai WeChat Pay. Tapi masalahnya orang asing nggak bisa pakai WeChat Pay. So, you know, even making payments in certain destinations is becoming very difficult. And saya bukan tua, tapi on the way to becoming a little bit more old. And yeah, I'm sometimes confused by all the technology, but it's there, and the world is changing, and tech is definitely the way. So that's a big tourism trend. And so how can we maybe apply certain sustainability ideas around the reality of tech and personalization? Sustainable tourism, active ecotourism, transformative tourism, wellness tourism. These are maybe some of the things that even Indonesia is very aware of. And even the minister in his opening remarks mentioned the importance of these. And di sini saya mau bilang bahwa sebenarnya Indonesia has a great opportunity to be a leader in sustainable tourism. Kalau dilihat ya, luar biasa the Indonesian archipelago with it's a living museum in terms of cultures, in terms of nature, in terms of just its overall beauty. So if there's any country that really should focus on sustainability as sort of a comparative advantage, it's Indonesia. And we need to wake up the industry and everybody to really start following that path. It's going to happen, so we may as well do it now rather than as we say in English, kick the ball down the road. It's better to work on it now. Travelers are going to spend longer times. I think the reaction to COVID, a lot of people want to have longer vacations. A lot of people now want to combine work with travel. So there's a lot of opportunity to get longer stay visitors. And I'm always impressed with Indonesia, you know, modifying and updating the visa policy, because I think that's very good. I must say on the visa policy, again, because I'm going to Bali next week, untuk si wisuda anak saya from the Bali Green School, that it still is so difficult to apply online. There's always some tech problem. So yeah, we have to be careful, because visas also can be something that prohibits people from coming or discourages people from coming. The minister mentioned over-tourism, absolutely a problem. Domestic tourism, I think, is a great challenge for a destination like Bali. In Bali, we receive 5 million international visitors and 5 million domestic visitors. And bukti bahwa itu already over tourism was last Christmas time. Pasti semua masih ingat waktu orang harus jalan ke airport karena macetnya segitu parah. So I think, you know, there's a lot of work. And it's so frustrating to see that all of the hard work by the Indonesian government to disperse tourism away from Bali with the 10 new Balis and everything, it's working, but it still has a long way to go. So, you know, dispersion of tourism, we can't have all the tourism focused in Bali. Bali's definitely a victim of over-tourism. And I think that the other thing, that tourism trend, is that people are really looking for open and natural places. And we have so many of those in Indonesia that we really should continue to build those. Next slide, please. So in short, if we were to talk about what are the major trends, maybe not for Indonesian travelers, but certainly for certain European travelers and North American travelers, travelers will seek out activities that offer a deep dive into local cultures, cuisines. Food tourism is becoming very, very big, and traditions, moving away from generic tourist attractions towards more authentic, off the beaten path experiences. Do you know, when I read that, it reminds me of when I first came to Bali in the late 1980s. That's exactly what Bali offered. It offered local culture. It offered, okay, the food is okay in Bali, but at least we had international cuisine. But the traditions and the strong, authentic way of life of the Balinese is what attracted people in the first place. It wasn't the beaches, maybe a little bit the natural scenery. The second point there is demand based on similar travel tastes, typical of mass tourism, is replaced by differentiated and segmented demand. It's good to know that many countries, even China, are moving away from mass tourism because individuals from the demand side are saying we don't want mass tourism anymore. We want something that is a little bit more to our tastes, which is challenging for the destination because it means that we have to expand our product to include the interests of so many different people. So that's a challenge, but we can use technology and creativity and good practice from around the world to innovate and to continue to create new products and services in travel and tourism. And of course, the offer must continually seek ways to meet not only the needs, but also the desires and expectations of discerning, demanding, and empowered customers, like the customers that Ibu Pauline was mentioning that come to her events that are upset that there's no carpet. By the way, Ibu Pauline, I think no carpet makes a lot of sense, and internationally it's quite common. So we have to get the Indonesians to accept that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to, because there's limited time, but I wanted to really set the stage because I know that the two people that will present after me will talk very specifically about certain research and activities that they've been involved in. But what's the point of quality tourism in the first place? And yeah, okay, we understand what Indonesia, the government wants quality tourism to be, but what is it? What are the underlying things there? So, of course, the offer delivered by an entity. So the supply side, the offer, what is the product and service, and it's being offered by an entity. That's the beginning of any quality tourism. It needs to be offered by somebody, and usually, you know, it needs to be something and offered by somebody, and it's an entity. It could be a travel company, it could be a destination, it could be a restaurant, it could be a hotel. So it's important to understand what is it that the organization is offering. I always like to think of service quality in terms of tangibilizing the intangible. And I'll give you the simple example, which many people use up in the right-hand corner of my slide, is a really nicely designed roll of toilet paper. And that's tangibilizing the intangible, because ya biasa aja roll of toilet paper, tapi di sini sudah menjadi satu logo, satu example of, wow, that's really pretty, and that will really excite the customer. So a lot of quality has to do with thoughtful things. So maybe we have to take away the small shampoo bottles, but maybe we can make nicer toilet paper design or other things. Maybe we have to find other ways to tangibilize what sometimes is intangible. And I think that's the challenge with services sometimes, is it's the intangible, it's the smiling faces of the staff, so on and so forth. Consistent delivery of products and guest services according to expected standards. I think Indonesia is quite good, especially Bali is good at consistent delivery of products and services. You find sometimes you go to hotels and it isn't consistent from the last time you stayed. And I think that again, I'd like to bring up Ibu Pauline's example, is that there's an expectation of having a carpet at the event, or there's an expectation of having plastic water bottles. So how to change that expectation and then be consistent thereafter. So even as we move to sustainability, I think we have to be consistent and not change our minds that we need to go in a sustainable direction. And we just need to change the minds of our consumers. One of the fourth point here, loyal customers are the greatest assets of any entity. Thailand has like 60% of all visitors are return visitors. And so it really helps to boost their tourism sector. Bali has that as well. And I think that there's parts of Indonesia where we can start to get, these loyal customers that will come back all the time. But also in the era of social media, Facebook and Instagram and all the other things, having customers that are loyal and satisfied, they're going to do all your marketing. So you can actually start to reduce a lot of the marketing budgets that you might have had in the past if you can find those loyal customers. Quality must be considered from the point of the consumer. I think any of you that are in management, and I certainly try to do it all the time, you've got to remind the staff, what is the perspective of the customer? What are they thinking? Are they enjoying the product as much as we think they are? In what ways are they not? And we need to hear that interchange and understand that. We also need to establish criteria and tools to be able to quantify quality. Again, in our minds, sometimes we think we know what quality is, but we need to have tools so that we have consistency across the organization. And hotels, I have to say, hotels are probably the best at doing this. It gets more difficult. It's because hotels is a controlled environment. And I think sometimes when we're dealing with more broadly tourism, let's say from the perspective of the Ministry of Tourism, there's so many actors. How are you going to get everybody to deliver quality? And so the tools and the criteria should be at the entity level, at the enterprise level. They should also be at the destination level, let's say specifically for Bali or specifically for Sanur, and then they should be at the national level. And these criteria should be measured as often as possible. And then establishing minimum requirements, standards across the tourism value chain provides minimal guaranteed quality of a destination. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. We probably could do more in Indonesia. And I think, again, maybe through GIPI, maybe that's one of the things, working with the various tourism associations. Let's really start to look at having standards for transportation, having standards for hotels, for restaurants, and working together to at least get the supply side to be prepared for that. The last thing I wanted to say about quality tourism, which I think the Indonesians are very gifted at. The Indonesians are naturally friendly, fun people. It's probably the reason that I ended up spending so much time in Indonesia. But the people represent the most critical factor of service quality in tourism and hospitality, with competence being a set of knowledge, skills, and attitude. And I think we have a little bit of a worry right now post-COVID because many young people are not interested in going into tourism. And so we need to make sure that we're working closely with the tourism schools, that young people are still interested in working in the tourism industry, and that, that's the product delivery at the end of the day. If you have competent staff and competent people that are friendly, that's 3/4 of the battle to finding quality tourism. Because always remember, tourism is a people business. It's an exchange, a people-to-people exchange. Next slide, please. I wanted to just finish off with a couple of standards for quality tourism that everybody can look up individually after my presentation. At PATA, we have the Tourism Destination Resilience Program, which is an online course that we offer. We can also do it in person. And this is really talking about, it's quality tourism, but it's about how we as an industry are going to be more resilient in the face of future crisis, because there's going to be more crisis. There's always been crisis. I remember I was married in Bali on the night of the Bali bomb, and I remember what that was like. And then we've had COVID. So we need to be resilient, and that's part of quality tourism, is making sure that the industry itself is resilient. I also like the ASEAN mutual recognition standards for tourism workers. It was work done by AusAid, funded by AusAid. And I'm sure in Indonesia, I'm sure that we're using it. But these are really great tools for working with employees in the hotel, in the restaurant, in the travel agency, in the tour operation, whatever it is. There's a lot of standards, and it's good that we have our tourism workers working to a standard that leads to quality tourism. And then GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, is really an overarching body that's promoting sustainable tourism across the value chain, working with lots of different partners. And there's great information that can be had there for government or for private sector entities. And then specifically for hotels, there's a new organization called Greenview, and they're doing a lot of work in environmental social governance. And I think they probably have done some work in Indonesia as well, but they're outstanding for guiding hotels in terms of how they go. So there's so much information out there in terms of standards moving towards quality tourism. It's really just a matter of being disciplined and using those. I think the last slide, please. And I think just in closing, of course, I think Ibu Pauline, I've mentioned your name so many times. I'm sorry about that. But I'm very glad that you brought up the Sustainable Development Goals. We are halfway through implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a 15-year commitment. So from 2015 to 2030, we've only accomplished 20% of the Sustainable Development Goals at the halfway point. Okay, we can use alasan karena ada COVID, ada ini, ada itu, tapi faktanya adalah bahwa we're not doing a very good job as a global community. And so I asked a few people, I said, people that are more involved in this, what happens if we don't achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? It's not good. It's not good for our world what's going to happen if we don't start to move towards achieving these SDGs. So I also encourage everybody that's joining the panel today to find ways to take even just one of the SDGs. And tourism really can be interfaced with most of them. But just take one and see if through your work that you can help us to move forward the Sustainable Development Goals, because otherwise we're going to have a very sad future, and tourism will probably not prosper. I don't think tourism will not prosper if we don't focus on sustainability. So I think the last slide is my contact information. I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, Bahar Academy, thank you so much for inviting me. Maaf sebenarnya saya tadi bisa omong bahasa Indonesia, all of it, tapi two things. One, it would be ambrolado, and number two, I know that most of you can understand English very well, and so this is maybe just a good opportunity to polish your bahasa Inggris a little bit. I believe that we can do sustainability. I think it's organizations like PATA are working with other organizations to really educate the consumer. I think in Indonesia, one of the things that we need to do is that we need to educate the consumer. And I'm not sure how we do that. Maybe we need to bring together the media, and we need to really focus on not our industry, but our customers, and start to tell them this is the new reality that we need to look at. So I think I'll finish there. Ibu Fairuz, I'll give it back to you, and I'm available if there's any questions. And again, thank you so much. And mohon maaf kalau ada kekurangan in any of my presentation. I do apologize in advance. Terima kasih banyak.
Baik, terima kasih banyak Mr. Peter Semone atas pemaparannya. Dari paparan tadi kita dapat memahami bahwa pariwisata memang harus terus mencari cara untuk memenuhi harapan customer, di mana harapannya adalah untuk melakukan perubahan ke arah yang lebih baik. Penting untuk menyeimbangkan faktor penawaran dan juga permintaan pariwisata. Untuk mencapai kualitas layanan, langkah pertama adalah memahami karakteristik permintaan dari key source market. Setelah itu dilanjutkan dengan produk yang sesuai dapat dikembangkan untuk memenuhi kebutuhan dan juga keinginan pasar yang teridentifikasi. Hingga saat ini, mencapai dan mempertahankan pariwisata memang sayangnya masih menjadi tantangan besar, begitu ya, bagi destinasi pariwisata di Asia Tenggara. Baik, sebenarnya ada beberapa Pak pertanyaan di kolom Q&A yang sudah ada. Mungkin karena keterbatasan waktu, saya akan pilihkan 2 pertanyaan terlebih dahulu. Gitu ya, mohon izin akan saya sampaikan. Untuk pertanyaan pertama kepada Bapak Peter, yaitu terkait dengan caranya menyaring demand dan juga request wisatawan. Jadi ditanyakan bagaimana sesungguhnya cara untuk menyaring demand atau request wisatawan yang beragam dalam hal menciptakan quality tourism. Apa sesungguhnya prioritas permintaan utama yang dapat diberikan fokus secara mendalam? Mungkin bisa langsung dijawab terlebih dahulu sebelum nanti saya lanjutkan ke pertanyaan berikutnya.
Yeah, that's a tough question, isn't it? Can you repeat it again? Ulang lagi intinya. Tadi saya nggak dapat semua. Sorry, Ibu Fairuz.
Ya, bagaimana cara menyaring demand atau request wisatawan yang beragam untuk menciptakan quality tourism? Inti pertanyaannya adalah sebenarnya they ask about the priority, the first priority that we can take, that we can put focus on it to achieve the quality tourism.
Yeah. I think if we look at, I think that the customer, again, depending on which market they're coming from, many of them are aware of the fact that they need to be more responsible with the environment, that they need to be more responsible with cultures. I'll tell you one idea that I've always had for Indonesia, and we kind of are doing it in Bali, but it's not really working very well in terms of implementation. If you look at the customs cards, when you arrive in Indonesia, you have to do the electronic customs and you have to share it with the customer. I wonder if we shouldn't have a little bit more of some sort of a declaration of how I will behave while I'm in Indonesia. And it can be, so I'm not going to bring too many cigarettes. I'm not going to bring too much alcohol. I'm not going to bring too many shoes. Apparently that's a peraturan yang baru, but I'm also going to be respectful of local cultures. And so I think that's one way that we can actually start to inform the customer that we're quite serious about sustainability, both in terms of culture and environment. So I that's my answer, Fairuz. I'm not sure if it was a good answer, but that's what it is.
Baik, terima kasih. Mungkin untuk pertanyaan kedua, Pak, saya izin akan translate langsung saja ya. Is there any special or specific standard that is used as an indicator of the success of quality tourism, especially in Indonesia? So whether there is any, certain things that where you can say that it's actually already quality tourism.
Yeah. So one standard that I use the World Economic Forum has the Travel and Tourism Travel and Tourism Development Index, and that's where they monitor 117 countries around the world on a number of areas, but this very much includes sustainability. It includes how much the government is focusing and prioritizing tourism. So at a macro level, I think that the World Economic Forum Travel and Tourism Development Index is a really good start point. And then when you go down the value chain, obviously there's specific ones for hotel, there's specific ones for tour operators. And again, I think GSTC is a very, very good a good area, because it not only is it about sustainable tourism, but it's also about, by achieving sustainable tourism, you're actually achieving quality tourism. Thank you, Ibu Fairuz.
Terima kasih, Mr. Peter Semone atas jawabannya. Mohon maaf Bapak dan Ibu, karena memang keterbatasan waktu, tidak semua pertanyaan bisa dijawab oleh Pak Peter, begitu ya Pak ya. Nanti mungkin jika ada pertanyaan lebih lanjut, bisa langsung dimasukkan ke dalam email beliau yang tadi ada, atau nanti email yang akan disediakan di busdev@bahar.co.id. Baik, kita akan beralih ke sesi selanjutnya, yakni topik kedua. Terima kasih Pak Peter.